Florence, 15th century Italy. Niccolò Machiavelli stands in the corner of a room, saying nothing. He isn't networking, isn't charming anyone. He's just watching. Within a few minutes, he knows exactly who in that room is lying, who is being played, who will hold when things get hard, and who will move the moment no one is looking. This wasn't a gift, it was a method. One he spent years developing in the most treacherous courts of Renaissance Italy, where a single misjudgment could cost you everything: your position, your freedom, sometimes your life. He learned to read people not from what they said or how they presented themselves, but from specific, unguarded moments most people walk right past. He identified 5 of them. Here's what they are and how to use them. 1. How they treat someone who can't do anything for them. You're having dinner with someone. All evening they're engaged, warm, easy to talk to. Then the waiter spills something. Small accident, no real harm done. And the person across from you shifts completely. Voice sharpening, expression closing off, speaking to the waiter in a way that's just slightly too cutting, just slightly too cold. Then they turn back to you and pick up the conversation without missing a beat. Most people file that away as nothing. Machiavelli would have filed it as everything. His reasoning was simple. How someone behaves toward a person they need something from tells you almost nothing. That behavior is managed, calculated, performed. But how they treat someone who has no power over them, a waiter, a doorman, someone in a service role, that behavior has no audience. There's no upside to being decent, and no real consequence for not being. So whatever comes out in that moment is what's actually there. He used this constantly in the Florentine courts, watching how powerful men treated their servants and subordinates when the stakes were low. The answer, almost always, told him more than months of political observation. In practice, watch the person around anyone they have nothing to gain from. It doesn't need to be dramatic. One moment is usually enough, because it's the one moment they're not thinking about how they come across. 2. How they react when someone else gets good news. A mutual friend just landed something big, a deal, a promotion, something they've been working toward for a long time. You mention it, and you watch. Some people genuinely brighten. They ask questions. They seem almost personally pleased. Others go through the motions. A flat, "That's great," a quick subject change, or they find some quiet way to undercut it. "She got lucky with the timing. That account isn't as big as it sounds. I'm surprised they went with him, honestly." Machiavelli saw this as one of the cleanest reads available, and the logic holds. Someone who is secure in themselves can be glad when other people win. It costs them nothing. Someone who isn't secure experiences other people's success as a kind of indictment, a reminder of what they haven't done, haven't become. The dismissal or the faint praise is just that feeling finding an exit. What makes this so useful is that it's also predictive. The person who can't celebrate a friend's success today is the same person who will quietly resent yours when it comes. It's not about that friend. It's about a disposition, and dispositions don't switch off. In practice, share someone else's win, not your own, and just watch what happens. The response is usually immediate and unfiltered, which is exactly why it's worth paying attention to. 3. How they behave when they have the upper hand. Someone joins an organization, new to the role, eager to make a good impression. They're considerate, collaborative, easy to work with. Months go by, and slowly a different version of them emerges, not with their superiors, who see the same person as before, but with the people beneath them. Credit starts traveling upward. Corrections start happening in public. The hierarchy gets referenced a little too often, a little too pointedly. Machiavelli's line on this is worth remembering. Power doesn't change people. It just removes the reasons to pretend. Before someone has power, most of their behavior is strategic, whether they know it or not. They're cooperative because they need allies. They're deferential because the situation calls for it. Once the power shifts, so does the incentive. What you see after that is what was always there. He divided people into two types when it came to this. The first kind uses whatever advantage they have to make things easier for people below them. They share credit. They correct privately. They treat the authority as something functional rather than personal. The second kind uses it to remind people of the gap. They create distance. They assert themselves unnecessarily. They seem to need others to feel their position. The first type was trustworthy before the power. The second type was just performing. In practice, watch the person in any situation where they hold an edge. Formal authority, expertise, social standing, information. What do they do with it? That tells you which type you're dealing with. 4. How they talk about people who are no longer around. You get to know someone, and eventually the past comes up. Old relationships, former friends, ex-colleagues, people who used to be close and aren't anymore. Pay attention to the pattern, not the individual stories. Some people talk about old relationships with a kind of clear-eyed complexity. Things didn't work out. Both sides played a role. Here's what they took from it. Others have a different relationship with their past. In every story, they were the reasonable one. Every falling out involved someone else's betrayal or failure or toxicity. There's no story where they got it wrong. No version of events where the other person had a point. Machiavelli's observation was straightforward. The person who speaks about everyone who's left their life in the same unflattering terms is showing you exactly how they will eventually speak about you. Not because they're malicious necessarily, but because it's a pattern of thought. One where accountability always lands elsewhere. Where problems are always generated by other people. Where the self is always the constant exception. It also tells you something about what happens when you're not in the room. If they're willing to speak about people who can't defend themselves, that willingness doesn't disappear when the subject changes. In practice, you don't need to push the conversation toward this. It tends to come up naturally. When it does, don't evaluate the stories individually. Look at the overall shape. Is there any self-awareness in there? Any acknowledgement of their own role? If not, that absence is the data. 5. What they do when no one's watching. 3 scenarios. You nick the car next to you in a parking lot. Minor, barely visible, no witnesses. Do you leave a note? A cashier gives you back too much change, noticeably more than they should have. Do you say something? You find a wallet on the street with cash in it. What do? You won't observe these exact moments, but their equivalents show up in small ways constantly, and Machiavelli considered them the most reliable test of all. His reasoning, every other form of behavior, is potentially a performance. People can be warm to the waiter because they know you're watching. They can celebrate a friend's success because they've learned to manage the reaction. They can be restrained with power because the scrutiny is high. But the moments when someone genuinely believes there are no witnesses, those can't be performed because there's no audience to perform for. What a person does in those moments isn't who they're trying to be, it's who they are. In practice, these moments are small and easy to overlook, which is part of why they matter. Does he return the shopping cart when there's no one around to notice? Does she keep the minor promise that would be easy to forget? The small things, done consistently when there's no reward for doing them, are about as honest a signal as you'll find. The 5, briefly. 1. How they treat someone with no power over them. The performance drops there. 2. How they react to someone else's good fortune. The insecurity shows there. 3. How they behave when they have the upper hand. The real character surfaces there. 4. How they talk about people who have left their lives. The accountability, or the lack of it, is there. 5. What they do when no one is watching. Everything else is there. You don't need to interrogate anyone. You don't need a confrontation, or years of history, or some dramatic moment of revelation. You just need to watch, the same way Machiavelli watched. Quietly, without judgment, without tipping your hand. Because people show you who they are constantly. The only question is whether you're paying attention when they do.